The whistleblower complaint alleges that not only has our government had these craft of, quote, non-human origin, but that it's keeping it secret. And for decades, the Air Force discredited sightings of UAPs by pilots like you. Does it sound possible to you that that kind of secrecy is still happening, this kind of disinformation, this time around aircraft?
Well, that just seems to be the case. I've been reporting on unidentified objects since 2014 and 2015 off of the coast of Virginia Beach. And still, that conversation hasn't elevated to the point where pilots still feel comfortable reporting. So yes, I still believe that there is secrecy and stigma associated with this topic. And this conversation that we're having today, I think, is a massive step in the right direction.
Can you describe exactly what you saw when you were flying in the air that night?
Certainly. We were seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of clear spheres. And we were seeing these all over our working areas on a near daily basis, sometimes coming as close as 500 feet to our aircraft as we were flying our operations. We were seeing this not only off the eastern seaboard, but we were seeing this down south off Jacksonville, Florida, as well as off the west coast. Now, with the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office reporting that we're seeing spheres globally that are proceeding from 0 to 2 Mach on a regular basis, we still haven't really figured out what those objects are.
And you, largely to your efforts and a few others, and people are now speaking out, pilots are now speaking out. But in general, especially a couple of years ago, but you say even now still to a certain extent, what are pilots told when they come back and say, oh my God, look at what I saw and what I recorded in my cockpit camera?
Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't even get to that point, unfortunately, Elizabeth. Pilots aren't taking it back to their companies, to their safety offices and reporting this. Typically what I'm hearing from aircrew that are calling and reporting is that they're seeing objects, they're typically reporting it to air traffic control, and that's really where the conversation ends. There'll be a number of other aircraft that will report the same thing in the same vicinity, but there's no further action taken. It was a bit disappointing to hear the
Go ahead.
Hear the FAA chief talk. It was a little disappointing to hear the FAA representative at the latest public meeting that the NASA independent study team had stated that he was only familiar with maybe 4 or 5 reports of UAP from their FAA controllers. I'm personally hearing reports from pilots that they're seeing objects on almost a nightly basis off the Northern Pacific as well as Northern Atlantic.
Almost a nightly basis?
And that's been happening for several months. Yes.
Okay, if these non-human craft are in fact flying around the Earth on almost a nightly basis, would it make sense to you that one or more of these would crash or land?
Well, that's the assumption that we have to make if David's story is 100% true. If these objects are flying around, they have been for a number of years, the assumption would be that they would likely crash at some point and that there would be an operation to retrieve it.
A former staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee is publicly calling on the government to reveal what it has. He says he's spoken to 4 witnesses who say the same thing that you do, that Grusch says, that we have material from non-human craft, and he writes, we must know the facts concealing such vital information. If we are not alone, this poses a huge barrier to successfully adapting to the world around us. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Not only we're not able to adapt to the reality around us, but there's all sorts of potential concern for miscommunication or identification in war zones, potential safety hazards with air traffic, and just the reality that we're just not ready for something potentially if it is happening around us, if we're not willing to acknowledge it.
This former staff director also writes that there is a pattern, a persistent pattern of surveillance around Department of Defense test ranges and around nuclear sites. First, have you heard of that? And if so, wouldn't this also make this a matter of national security?
I have to insist that it does. These are being detected around training ranges and places of national security, such as nuclear facilities. Additionally, we can see that there is some level of repeatability and congregation of these objects in those areas, and that should be a cause for concern. Some of the work that we're doing at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics is related around the detection and sensing of these objects, and there are patterns that can be pulled out, and we are seeing them conglomerate mostly around training ranges and military operation areas.
Do you believe Grusch's claims?
It's not about trusting him. It's the fact that he's brought evidence forward that we can now go through and verify, and that's now in the hands of Congress to be able to go and verify that story. His story is believable, and I think it's now up to Congress to verify it and then communicate the results of that to the American people.